COVID brought me down to rock bottom, I am so grateful for the walls that the pandemic gave me when I decided to change my life, with really no choice. I think for the first time, there wasn't anything really going on to distract the people closest to me from the real 911 in front of them. And it's not that I think a worldwide pandemic should happen every 5 years to help people get through addiction. But I do think that, like, when I look backwards, if you think about your life through the lens of having no distractions, you can really get quiet with yourself and you can hear over and over and over again, you're broke, you're getting into trouble, you're ruining relationships. And everything that you've lost matters deeply to you. And that to me was my whisper.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Aaron, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom, because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world, but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey, my friend, it's Erin here, and it's amazing. We've done over 300 episodes, and we've never had a conversation like the one you're about to hear. We've never talked to anyone about addiction and overcoming that, and the root of that for so many people being this concept of, feeling like they were too much when they were younger. They had ADHD and struggled in school and were misunderstood. And I'm just so proud of my friend Drew Sullivan and excited to share his story with you. This is not some, polished redemption arc or corporate recovery story. It's really a very authentic conversation and reflection and inspiration that comes from the stories and the things that he's figured out. So here are some of the things we'll talk about. We'll talk about asking why instead of what's wrong with you has so much power. In fact, it's something I immediately, when I heard Drew talk about this actually on another podcast, I immediately started thinking about my own relationship, in particular with my son, and how to reframe some of the things that I do with him and how I push back. We talk about why being yourself and being quote unquote too much aren't the same thing and how to tell the difference. We talk about his addiction and how he realized that the very things that came with addiction were the very things, or the very things he lost with addiction were the same things that he loved actually the most. And so if you've ever struggled, whether it's with addiction or feeling like you were too much, or sort of those battle wounds, battle scars that you still have from maybe it's your youth or your early years, and you're still recovering from essentially feeling like you were a misfit, that you were misunderstood, uh, this is an episode that I think will spark some really powerful emotions in you. So Drew Sullivan is, I like to call him a friend. We became friends this summer. He's an entertainment executive at APB Speakers. He books and works with some of the most well-known speakers out there, in particular in higher education. He is a massive force in this space, not just because of who he books and what he does, but what he believes and what he talks about. He is an absolute thought leader. But more importantly, he is also a fashion icon, at least to me, always donning a tracksuit with just such power and flair. And I even might have bought him a Christmas tracksuit this year. So I'm excited to share the wisdom, the authenticity, the humor from my friend Drew Sullivan. Enjoy the conversation. So I don't want to bury the lead. We got to talk about the tracksuits. I
Oh,
want to
yeah.
start there before we go deep. I want to warm people up. So when did the tracksuit, tell us about the tracksuit fashion. When did it start?
I was at Bloomingdale's one day, and it was right when I started to see money change after years of paycheck to paycheck through addiction. And I was just looking at a few things, and then I just out of the corner of my eye saw this very eccentric Lacoste tracksuit that just grabbed my attention. And I thought to myself, oh, this would be fun. And so I, ended up getting it, and it took a bit. I think it took probably about a month for me to actually wear it. And then I wore it, and I enjoyed the fact that it was freeing, but I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. It's still got some flair, some pizzazz, and I'm comfortable. And then I ended up going to the Lacoste outlet. The only outlet in the US is in Massachusetts and Rentham.
Is it the
Yeah.
Rentham one?
Yeah. And so I went there, and then there was this and I call it's one of my favorite ones that I wear now. It was my first tracksuit from Lacoste, but I guess my second one. And I call it key lime pie because of the coloring on it. And I just said to myself, I'll never wear this. And this is it. I'll never wear it again. I won't get another one. These two, and that's it. I got my two tracksuits. 28, 29 tracksuits later, I just love them. I think that there's this idea that, part of it I think is being a rebel, right? Part of it is we have to dress up at work. We have a dress code. I don't know when the dress code at my company stopped, but I can definitely tell you that it was my disruption that stopped it. And I don't know if it's unofficially or officially even been changed, but I definitely know that there's been some impact on my side for pushing the envelope around wardrobe. And then there's a few folks that still follow the rules. But I think, we're in a time now where, we can't even figure out common decency around the world to make sure that people have the ability to stay, with the opportunity to be human beings. So why do I have to worry about what color polo I'm wearing to the office? I think we really need to move out of that and start caring about things that really matter, because wardrobe is the least of our concerns.
Yeah. Well, and obviously I didn't have you on for fashion sense, and it's not all I see about you, but for me, it is deeper. To me, it's a permission slip. I hate that term, but when I see it, somebody that, always wants to push the boundaries, I see it as a permission slip, whether it's in what I wear or what I do. So I had to ask you about it. But I know I wanted to start there because I know we're probably going to get kind of deep, and we're going to talk about empathy and vulnerability and addiction. And so my first question, I know you as this deeply passionate, empathetic, vulnerable person. Have you always been that way?
Yes, I would think so. I think as a kid, I didn't know how to show empathy. So I would show up in certain situations, and with a big personality and having ADHD and ADD my entire life, I never felt for a very long time, I never felt that the qualities that I thought were the strongest in myself and that were the most natural for me, I felt that they actually othered me. And this was no harm or no intentionality by my parents or anything. But I think that mental health has changed a lot over the years. And I was that young person that was basically branded with ADHD. And it wasn't from a sense of you're the problem. It was more like you're the patient. And what I mean by that is that my mother's a nurse and almost 50 years. And I definitely think I get my empathy from my mother, and very much common in the healthcare space. And I think that my mom, it was very difficult for her to not look at me as her patient. Even though I was her son, and even though she wasn't a behavioral medicine professional, psychiatrist, you name it, there was a level of medical background that she had that saved me, I'm sure, many times. But at the same time, I think was probably very challenging for her as mom versus nurse.
Yeah.
And so for me, I always was, I grew up in that generation where I was never, no one ever asked me why I was doing something. It was always what I was doing and why it was wrong. It was never why are you making this choice to talk too much in class or to share your opinion or to ask a question that, maybe the teacher may think that you know the answer to, but maybe I genuinely did not know the answer to. Or maybe it didn't fully make sense to me, or maybe I thought there was a bigger conversation there. As much as it was very difficult at times to understand the qualities that I had that were strengths, they were framed as weaknesses to me. It was very difficult for me to know that a lot of these actions that I was showing the world were not all that bad, that they were good qualities, and that I had to just kind of finesse and mature and understand the time and the place and all of these things that we learn as we grow. I never really had those conversations. Like, no one ever really talked to me about anything that I was doing and how it was far more normal than they made it seem. That there were so many reframes that I could use in my future that I use today with a lot of these strengths. And so it's hard to tell if I was truly empathetic when I was growing up. I was always curious, and I feel like I always cared about what other people cared about. And I think the fog of my own mental health and behavioral journey, I think at times didn't allow me to not only be shown as an empathetic person versus a nosy or just curious busybody, as I heard that term so many times growing up. But not only that, I feel like I couldn't even feel it myself. So it wasn't even just that the world didn't look at me as someone who was empathetic and kind and wanted other people to have an easier experience navigating the world. But I don't even think that I knew that for myself. And maybe it was because I felt othered so many times throughout my journey as a child. I never wanted other people to feel othered. And so I think naturally.
Tell us more. What was the time? Help us understand, what do you mean by othered? Was there a time? I know you've told stories about, like, in second grade when you sort of were like damned for cheering on your friends, or like, is there a time where you can help us understand what that othering felt like?
It was a combination of a number of things. On my mom's side of the family, I'm one of eight or so, I guess, just cousins, and they're all girls and me. On my dad's side of the family, I'm one of 16 cousins, and it's a mix of boys and girls. And so I think that on my mom's side, like, I have far more of a personality that aligns with my mom and my mom's side of the family than my dad's. But I was around a bunch of women. My mom's one of four girls in her family, so it's like I have three aunts and uncles, but predominantly women. And so I was very much. I felt very much like I belonged at those family parties when I'd be sitting at a table and I'd be having those conversations and talking about things that I had no business talking about at my age. But I do believe it's really that had a huge influence on my storytelling and just my ability of not only telling a story, but also caring about other people's stories. But then on the flip side of that, when I'd be around my dad's family, I was as Cardi B would say, like, am I the drama? Like, I was the drama. I was the storyteller. I was the imagination. I was the energy. And all of that was, came with a lot of good, but it also came with a lot of bad. I was the one that got in trouble. I was the one that would pull the prank. I would be the one that would, encourage my other cousins to go do something else, do this, do that. And I could never not find my way out of trouble. Like, I mean, it was like, there was no way for me to avoid it. And I think that was the brand I kind of developed within my dad's side of the family. And in my mom's side of the family, over time, I became one of the, leaders of the storytelling gossip table. I didn't just sit on the sidelines. I was the Tom Brady of that game. And so I think, for me, every situation I walked into, because then that same Andrew, personally more than Drew, I would show up at school, and I would, at times, I think through my behavioral issues and just ADHD and ADD, I would forget that I wasn't at that table with my family. And so when I say othered, I don't say it in a way of like, by any means, I know my privilege and some of the opportunities I have in this world, and it's not in the same sense that we talk about it, from that really dangerous acronym DEI that people are so afraid of. It's this idea that, and to your listeners, I'm saying that as a very facetiously and as a joke. It was this idea of other just based off of who I was, and I did not feel safe. I did not feel heard, and I did not feel seen. And at the time, I think that whenever those types of feelings that I didn't really have the awareness to understand at the time would creep in, I would then respond with bigger and bolder and more. But I don't regret the fact that I had a hard upbringing and that times that made me feel othered, because I believe that I was able to kind of carry that into the world now and have a different level of appreciation for, say, like the soft parenting of today. Um, different things that just are that are new age, but because I was growing up at a time where they weren't as out there for the world to put into practice, I actually have a far more appreciation, I feel like, for the way in which parents and teachers and other adults that work with young people navigate that space today. Whereas others might be like, oh, when I was growing up, like my mother would say, do this, do that. And I can sit back and say, yes, that happened with me as well. And I can tell you 3 reasons why that was good for me growing up. And I can tell you 3 additional reasons why that was bad for me growing up. And I think we need to look at both of them, because we're all, I mean, Brene Brown says this, right? Like if you want to find something about yourself that you don't like, or that doesn't help you blend into society, you're going to find it. Like we can all find reasons why we don't belong. So instead of finding reasons why we don't belong, how about reframing those reasons that we think we don't belong? And instead of saying we don't belong because of those reasons, the secret there, I think, is that we actually do belong because of all those reasons.
Was there a time when, I know this is like dramatic and maybe there wasn't, but was there a time where you finally had that epiphany? Like, did something happen to you or you're like, all those times, if somebody would have just stopped and asked me, why, Drew, are you doing this? Why are you asking this question? Why are you, doing this? It would have been so much more powerful. Like, how did you get there?
I think that part of the journey for me is this idea that it was like little moments and little whispers. I feel like that would come, and it would just be that person that, like, and this happens to me so much and I think it's probably because of some of the same skills that limited me and that have limited me over the years have also been my strengths, right? And so there's times where, like, if someone knew me or knew my parents really well, maybe they know that I was taking Ritalin or was taking another ADHD medication, and that I had trouble with the idea that, you know, not everything that I was doing or saying was always good. Like maybe they had that idea. So those folks might, they may stay quiet when they see me do something good. But then I had a whole group of people in my community growing up that didn't really know the dirty laundry of my story, right? And so they would see me showing those skills like out in public in the world. Maybe it was working, I was a singer growing up in church, right? And so we would go and sing at a nursing home. And so people would be like, oh, that's so great. That's so kind. And so I had those little micro moments, I think, where it was kind of by strangers per se, but not always strangers, maybe just some people that didn't know everything behind the scenes, but they knew enough about my life, where they would say something about something I did, and it would be something really good, and it would show me off in this really great light, or it would be really validating for me to hear like, wow, that was so nice that you did that, or it was so great that you took time to do that. And so I think like it wasn't a specific moment where things shifted, but I think consistently over time, I've had like little crumbs dropped by people that they didn't really realize in those moments that their comments mattered so much to me. Because what it did was that it would restore the idea that like, oh, wow, 20 people are telling me like that I talk out in class too much, that I don't know how to behave and X, Y, and Z. But then there's this one person that's like, wow, that was a really great answer that you had to that question. And I didn't know you were passionate about this. End of conversation. They probably thought they were, okay, cool, let's move on with the day. But for me, that was like so much validation that I just carried with me. And it allowed me to kind of stay confident in a world that, without them really knowing, was really pushing me into a kind of a dark place of feeling like everything I was doing wasn't good enough, and everything that I was doing wasn't being seen for the intention that I had when I thought of the idea or thought to do it. And I do think that mindset won eventually as I moved into addiction, and we'll get there. But I do think that it could have won way earlier, and it could have been far more dark, and it could have been something that I wasn't able to handle on my own. But because of consistent, just, I don't love the word validation because it makes it seem like I was searching for it, but consistent just the ability to not, whether it was that they didn't want to focus on the negative or they didn't know about the negative, that they were just looking at something good that I had done and giving me the flowers for that, right? And I think that for me was enough for me to just naturally and organically learn that, like, okay, I may never learn how to harness this, but I do know that this isn't all bad.
Yeah.
Because of other people that are giving me this insight and this kind of just feedback. And so I think that it was very unconscious. Like, I didn't do it with the intention for it to be this way. But I do think that because of that, I was able to consistently stay hopeful that one day I was going to be able to break through all of these personality flaws that were going to limit me in life and be able to show the world all of the good stuff that I brought to the table without bringing in some of that negative. And what I've found now, and as I've grown, is that, that comes with growing up and being an adult, but it also is something where I think, there is just this like natural thought for us to not acknowledge the good things we're doing. Like, and I think, like, would it be great if there was one person that came around, like, and it was like the fairy godmother from Cinderella puts a little, pixie dust on me and I, turn from that pumpkin into Cinderella? Yeah, that'd be awesome. But it didn't really work that way for me. And to a point where I don't even think I get like, and it could be a me problem, right? Like, maybe I don't receive those types of people in my life for what they're there to show me. And that could be just the fact that I'm jaded into thinking like that, I always have to watch the parts of me that are not the best parts of me. And I think that, it's not a bad practice, but I do think that as I get older and I start to care less about other people's opinions, it does make you question why you put so much time and effort into caring about it for so long. And so I guess like what I would say is that if there were folks that came into my life that were all in on me, I think that the noise coming from the two closest people in my life, my mom and dad, that I had ADHD, that I had ADD, that, that I was potentially going to be the problem in that environment, I don't think it allowed people to be as maybe forthcoming and as bold with me around when they'd have a really good experience with me.
Yeah.
Because they kind of thought, oh, well, I can't share that with him because he has these issues.
It might unleash the bad again, or might give him, like, we got to keep the leash short.
Yeah, and I think that my mom and dad were very outspoken about my truth for my own protection. Sure. They didn't want people to not know about the challenges I had.
Sure.
But in turn, what that did was that and today it would be completely different, but at that time, the majority of people, they did not know how to navigate the complexities of how do you instill confidence in someone that is hyperactive and that doesn't know always when to stay quiet and when to speak up. Because they were probably fearful if I applaud him for using his voice in this moment, or if I validate, his perspective around something that me or someone else on our staff deemed as inappropriate, am I going to give him the confidence to then act that way all the time? And I think that, again, we're focusing on the what and not the why. Because the reality is that, like, we have a major problem in this country with adults having conversations with young people and young people having conversations with adults. And it's definitely changing. But I think that, like, we have so many folks that are insecure and think like, oh, the young people think they know everything. And then we have so many young people that don't want to speak up because they believe that the people that are older have power. And the reality is that, like, both can be true on both sides.
Yep.
But the reality is that most people that have power want to listen to someone who's younger. And most people that are younger, that have intellect and have ideas and have creativity, they want to listen to the person with more experience. And so I think, like, for me, I was that young person that just was kind of crying for the right guidance all the time. Like, it was like, I look back on it now and I was like, did you not notice that me acting a certain way or ignoring something or just, deciding that it was better for me to do it this way, even though I was told not to, did you not think to ask, like, especially when I was told not to do something and then I did it, were you not thinking to ask, like, well, wait, you knew that that wasn't the best idea because we talked about it. Why did you do it? And instead, it was always just focusing on, like, what we said no and you did it anyway, therefore you're in trouble. And for me, I never learned anything. I don't think that a child, when they're 15 years old and they decided that they, wanted to steal some beers from the fridge, that you need to be like, why did you take those beers? You know why they took those beers. But I do believe that when they steal another child's toy on the playground at age 4, you should ask them why they took that toy, because that's getting them to think more about their own actions and why they're doing things. And I do think that the people that think more from this inner lens of, and you've heard me say this before, it was really what shifted everything for me when it came to, like, how I navigate the world in recovery. And it's when you and I first met, is this idea that when we focus on living our lives from the outside in, we are. But when we focus on living our lives from the inside out, anything is possible. Because you're not thinking about, how is this decision impacting me? Do I have the ability to do this? No, you're starting from that place. You're starting from, like, before I do that, does it align with my values and my long-term goals? Before you make that decision, you're saying to yourself, do I like working with that person? Do I know how to work with people like that? Like, you're thinking this way before you enter in to the actual domain. Like, so when you walk into then those settings, you're like, I can do this, or I'm strong enough to do this, or I know I'm going to cry because that makes me cry every time. So why am I going to hide those tears? Like, and some people may say you're overthinking things. No, I'm not. I'm just, it's my internal compass, and I know what direction to go in, because I'm thinking about, how does this impact me and why do I want to do this? Why is this important to me? Why does this matter? Is this going to be something that I'm proud of in 10 years, 15 years, before I do it and then have to look backwards and look how it's going to impact me after I do it? And I think as I've shifted my mindset with that way in life, it's just really interesting how so many of these problems that I had growing up and that I've had even into my adult life, how they've quickly stayed present in my life as options. But I am thinking far more before I do them. Like, I have said things to people throughout the years outside of being under the influence, because, those, the plethora of insults and shitty things I've said to people while using, I can't count. But sober, I feel at this point in my life, like, I do not put my foot in my mouth anymore. I may not say things that people like.
Right. It's different.
But I don't really have regret in thinking that, and this definitely has to do with work too. I mean, I have a few folks in my industry, my company, think, for anyone listening that knows Aaron and I's industry, you can get creative. I hope it's not you. But if you are listening, I have people I don't like, people I don't care for. Sure, people that don't care for me. But I can say without a shadow of a doubt, outside of very few folks that have thrown a piece of raw meat in front of the lion, I haven't done anything wrong. I've just been myself. Now, if you don't like me for who I am, that's okay. We don't have to like each other. But I know now, because of the way I live my life, that, like, I am not walking into situations without thinking through the way that I want to respond or the way I want to be in those situations. And I think as a kid, I was constantly trying to be someone I wasn't, instead of just saying, like, oh no, you're this person. You still shouldn't say half the stuff you say because it's not aligning with who you are. But you need to be more authentic with who you are as a person, so that when you do say something, people's reaction is not, oh, or that was rude. It's more like, oh yeah, I know you feel that way. I know that matters to you. I know that's important to you. And I think that people start aligning with what matters to you when you lead that way.
Hey there, it's Erin. I'm just popping in real quick to ask you a question. Is there any chance you know someone who is looking for a keynote speaker for their upcoming event? Look, I know that many event organizers, they struggle to find a speaker who provides both tangible value and business knowledge, but that also lights their audience on fire. And I truly believe there aren't many speakers like me out there who are both former corporate executives and professionally trained speakers. And there's definitely none that roll in with an orange suitcase they unpack with their audience. Trust me on that. I would love nothing more than to bring my message of using authenticity as your strategic career and business advantage to people spinning in your universe, especially if you'd be there. I promise my talks always create an immediate buzz, but not just right after, but for months and years after the event is over. You can learn more about my message, style, and reviews, and share my speaking info by going to beauthenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. That's B, just the letter B, authenticinc.com/keynote-speaking. Or of course, we have it right in the show notes to make it easy for you too. Well, and you said something, I just want to put a finer point on this, and then I want to go to the addiction stuff because it's the stuff that we've never really dove into before, you and I,
Yeah.
and on this podcast. But you said something so important towards the beginning, that you felt this tug you felt between being yourself and being too much. And I am certain that 90% plus of the people listening are going, yes, that's the question, Erin. You always talk about authenticity and how do I do that and not be too much? What advice would you give to people who are going, yes, that's what I struggle with, Drew? How do I make sure I'm not too much?
I think that it is a very difficult question because it's different for everyone. And I also know, and I don't want to be, you and I are both in the speaking industry in a space that doesn't have some of the same framework and structures as other industries. And I know that there's obviously professional behavior in certain work settings and school settings. I mean, as a teacher and things like that, hospital, healthcare workers. But I do think that there's a huge difference between who you are and what you are, right? And so when I say what people have a problem with is what you're doing. It's not who you are. And I think that that is something that we don't remind ourselves. And that is a cliche piece, right? You're not defined by your actions, and the truth is we are defined by our actions. But I think that what people mean to say is that the way that you act in moments of weakness or in moments of stress or in moments of extreme excitement or joy, that is a reaction. And I think that what people need to make sure of, and this is where I think that question comes into play, is you need to try to work on making sure that the way that you respond to situations, the way that you show up is aligned with who you are. And I think that we so quickly will act a certain way. And in the same breath that someone may say, oh, that action is not the way you should have acted in that moment. And then we may feel well, you're not letting me be myself. I think that a lot of the times we also need a question but wait, is that who I am? Why did I react that way? What was it worth it? What was the bigger picture? And so I don't know if there's an actual answer to that question other than the fact that, you need to know, you need to know why you're in certain spaces, because some people show up to work because it's a job. They get paid for it. They have maybe that inner flame is lit some other part of their life. So for work, it might be the way that I look at just going to the grocery store, right? That might be for work for them, might not have any type of purpose or passion. I couldn't work in environments like that, and I don't think you could either. But there are people that do. And I think that we need to make sure that we're not putting all of our weight in areas where we get adjudication, right? Or that we get feedback. I think that it's so easy to say oh, I don't feel myself at work. Well, that might be because at your job, part of the nature of your industry is getting peer reviewed or getting critiques from your team, or maybe, the fact that you have a really strong, loud voice. Well, maybe your company is very much built on everyone having the same voice and teamwork. And maybe there are just systemic structural boundaries that don't allow you to be yourself in that setting. And maybe the people that are telling you, oh, that's a little too much, maybe they're absolutely right for that setting. I couldn't work at a library. I wouldn't be myself. But that doesn't mean that the library system would be pushing me to not want to be myself. And so I think many people that don't feel like they can be themselves in their job I think it's more of this idea, and a speaker that I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's part of that beautiful community that we're a part of. Amy Vetter is her name, and she talks about human fulfillment. And I apparently said something to her at a speaker showcase that she's kept with her, and she let me know this actually yesterday, which was this idea about like not feeling yourself in the workplace. I think is very much also attached to burnout, right? Because like in the sense that if you're fulfilled and you're able to kind of feel that when you're going to work, for example, or in any kind of like everyday scenario or every week or anything you have a routine around, if you're not fulfilled in those moments, it's easy to just feel burnt out. And I think so many people decide like, oh, when I'm burnt out, I have to run. I have to leave that community, that industry, that setting. And apparently, one thing I said to her, I don't remember saying this, but she reminded me, is that burnout doesn't happen because you hate your job. Burnout happens because you love your job.
Mm.
Burnout from
Mhm.
your family doesn't happen because you hate your kids. It, I mean, maybe some people, but for the most part, it's because you want something different than what they're bringing, or you care about something that maybe they don't value. And instead of saying, how do we become more aligned? It's easier to just walk away. It's easier to say that's too much. And so I think for me, like what I would say to folks is like, very rarely, if you're in the space that you're supposed to be in, like if your values align with the industry you're in, or if you find value in the work you're doing, very rarely, if you're experiencing burnout, is it because of the fact that like the job itself is too intense or the work is too hard. It's usually because of the fact of something around you that's not really making sense, or it could be a leader, it could be someone on the team, or it could be that you are not in the right place and doing what you are meant to do. And so I think, I still have a handful of employees that feel, or colleagues, not employees, but colleagues
Mm.
that feel that I am too open in the workplace. And again, they are some of the biggest proponents of my recovery journey and some of the things that I share. But they themselves would not be so open
Mm.
about that. Now, that doesn't mean that they should be telling me that what I am doing is wrong,
Yeah.
because that would be not allowing me to be myself in the workplace. The same breath, I shouldn't be telling them that they should wear their heart on their sleeve and that this workplace is like a therapist's office and like, let's talk about our feelings all the time. And I think that that happens too much, where our version of what work should be or what family should be or what going on a vacation should be, that we assume that that's what everyone else's definition of what that is as well. And I think that that is the number one question people have to ask themselves. Like, am I the problem, or is my makeup causing this disruption in my fulfillment, or is it everyone around me?
Let's shift a little bit and talk about the addiction piece because I think um, it's probably so helpful for so many people listening, whether they've dealt with their own addiction, are currently addicted, have employees. Tell us what brought that about, and I really want to understand, like, who is the Drew before and after the addiction? Did it change, significantly or not?
Yeah, I mean, sure. The if you ask different people in my life, I think there's so many different perspectives as to when addiction started or
Mm,
emerged.
sure.
I would like to say that I don't have memories of not having issues with addiction.
Mm,
I remember when I was so obsessed with playing like NBA Live on PlayStation 2 that I couldn't focus at school because I was so addicted to get home and play my video game.
mm,
So, I think that when people say like, "Oh, addiction
mm,
started,"
mhm.
I question that. I
Yeah,
think that there's a lot of folks that struggle with addiction far earlier than when it
yeah.
becomes with drugs or alcohol or something that could be deemed as a danger to who we are. Um, so I want to make that very clear that I
Yeah.
personally feel like I've always had addiction
You had a
issues.
predisposition, which I think is, happens
Important
all
to
too often.
understand,
Yeah.
and it also has to do with my ADHD and my
Sure.
ADD, and and coping mechanisms. And I think that for me, FOMO has been a
Mm,
huge catalyst for
mm,
addiction for me. I don't even think there were times where I thought through the dangers of what I was doing because I was so fixated on being a part of something, thinking that I needed to have this piece of who I was to be able to progress. I also grew up at a time where, I'm not Gen Z or by any means where social media, bless their hearts and good luck to Gen Z and Gen Alpha, I think is below them, right?
mhm,
Am I right about that?
mm,
Good luck because the social media is going to be trouble. But I did grow up, I think, where there was this world that really captured me, reality television, and so for me, I grew up in the reality TV days where it was starting out, and when I was in high school, it was right when Laguna Beach premiered, and the idea of red cup culture, was real, right? Like, when I watched that show, I saw people my age doing what we wanted to do, which was instead of, you know, stealing some beers from our parents and going and driving to, like, the woods near, like, the lake in our hometown, like, hiding behind a bunch of trees and thinking it was the coolest thing on planet Earth. These people were, like, out in the open filming a reality show with red cups in their hand in Southern California where everyone's beautiful, and I
mhm,
thought to myself, like, "Wait a minute, like, I kn this is why I drink in the woods and hide it from my parents, because this is waiting for me somewhere." And
mm,
so for me, I feel like it was a perfect storm of this idea that, like, they weren't showing why it was so dangerous for 16, 17, 18-year-olds to be drinking, like, the way that they were and doing the things they were doing. They were just showing it through, like, the lens of a highly produced, edited television show that made these young people look glamorous, and I fell for the bait, to a point where as I progressed, like, I moved with that age of, like, Lauren Conrad, Heidi Montag, Whitney Port, Adrena Patridge, from the city to the hills. Like, I followed it all, right? And by the time the hills aired, you know, I was like, I wanna be Heidi. I wanna be that fun party boy in New York. Like, I thought I was Heidi Montag of the East Coast, where
mm,
I was the person that was gonna be that fun PR person at night in New York City and helping people get drunk. And I quickly learned that, like, that wasn't who I was. And at the time, I wish I had had the agency to be like, "But wait, why do I love booze so much?"
mhm.
And
Why?
I didn't learn in that moment. It was just, "Oh, yeah, but, like, it's part of the entertainment industry, and, yeah, you don't wanna be that fun promoter that's promoting these parties, but you do love, the fast-paced hustle of the entertainment industry." And so, my early years of my career, like, I didn't just wanna be, one of these, young, cool people on reality TV. I made it my agenda. And so started working in reality TV. I started working with reality talent to a point where, like, I had a deal in front of me to sell a show for its client. The only way that the network would buy the show is if I was on the show, and I was like, "Oh my god, of course." And then I was on a
That's
show that I shouldn't have been on, that didn't show me in the best light, didn't show my skill set, my passions, the things I cared about, but I was drunk most of the time and I was having fun and I thought that was everything. And then I watched the show and I didn't learn the lesson then either.
Mm,
And I kept going and kept going and
mhm,
kept going and moving forward. And then I started working with a little bit more thought leadership within reality TV. And I say that as kind of a joke, but I worked with dance choreographers and there was a level of talent there. So I found a little bit more fulfillment, but there was always this constant, like, how do I make someone look better than they are? How do I constantly show others in this light, like a producer, like a representative, like a publicist? And I started doing that with myself. So it was like
mhm,
I started to see people make a lot of mistakes, do things behind the scenes, and we'd cut that, right? Like, we would never send that in a
mhm.
press release. We'd never put that in the final cut of a show. I started to lead my life that way, where I would make bad decisions and I'd cut those decisions out. And I would only show the really positive
Ah.
pieces of my life. And that revolving cycle
Mm,
for me, led me to a place where in 2015, like, I had really hit rock bottom for the first time in Miami. I needed to come home. I had run the course with these two gentlemen I had been working with on their dance brand. I learned through that people that I never wanted to be.
mm,
I have a lot of love in my heart for that whole experience, but I also very much feel that so much of my addiction was strengthened. Like, it was kind of like it was like a hurricane, I think, that, like, gained a lot of momentum when I was at UConn as an undergrad, and then I worked a couple years in New York, and I kinda gained a little bit more of who I was, even though I was still in the middle of the storm. Then I went down to Miami, and it was like the hurricane went from, like,
Mhm.
from a 4 to a 2 back to a 4, right? And it's like and I'm in the eye of it, and I needed to move home, and I moved home, and I started in the speaking industry, and I started to see a lot of fulfillment, but at that point, I was knee deep. Like, I had no idea how much I was drinking, and anyone that's in the LGBTQ community, specifically the gay male community with a little bit of privilege and good jobs, cocaine runs rampant.
Mhm.
It is I think just a social lubricant to
Mhm.
try to find more of who you are. I personally didn't need that. Like I tell people now, I get high off apple pie. So I am one of those people that I was observing everything around me, and I felt that I needed to partake in order to feel like I was good enough to be around certain people in certain situations. Many people choose to use to help them in those areas. I really didn't need to, and I think that's the hardest part for me is that, I wish people had noticed that because there were so many, moments where I feel like people could have said, "Hey, you have a big vibrant personality," or "You really like to have fun. You don't need to be, doing X, Y,
Mhm.
and Z in order to get there." But because it was so normal within the circles I was in, none of that was ever said. And so fast forward, COVID, it secluded many of us from the world. I
Mhm.
didn't have some of the same, excuses that I was able to make when the world was open. So it brought me a lot more into my thoughts, and my partner was able to see a lot more of my bad decisions in front of his eyes instead of, through a story or through someone else's story or hearing it through the grapevine or assuming something but not having facts. Everything was out there in the open.
Mm.
And, I got a DUI and, I was arrested for a DUI. I was found not guilty. That's a conversation we will not have on any podcast, but things work out for funny reasons. And, the same way that COVID brought me down to rock bottom, I am so grateful
Mm.
for the walls that the pandemic gave me when I decided to change my life, with really no choice. I mean, everyone kind of moved in the right direction. Everyone was bored out of their minds. I mean, it was August 2020. Like, my parents, it was the first time that I think my parents had the energy and the time to actually address some of the problems that I've caused them over at the time, my 30 years on this planet. And so it was in a way, and again, I might be acknowledging this for the first time right now, is I think for the first time, there was there wasn't anything really going on to distract the people closest to me from the real 911 in front of them. And I say that saying that all these people cared about my well-being for
Yeah.
so many years, but it was like my partner wasn't working on a show because there was no theater open. My mom and dad weren't going into the office, they were working from home. They weren't they weren't doing the things that they normally did.
Mm.
And I think everyone had spare time to think about, like, we don't want Andrew to die. And, because of that, I think that I had, like, an army behind me, but it was more than that for me because the same way that they had more time to think about me, I had more time to think about myself.
Yeah.
And it's not that I think a worldwide pandemic should happen every 5 years to help people get through addiction, but I do think that, like, when I look backwards, if you think about your life through the lens of having no distractions, you can really get quiet with yourself and you can hear over and over and over again, you're broke, you're getting into trouble, you're ruining relationships,
Mm.
and everything that you've lost matters deeply to you.
Mm.
And that to me was my whisper. And so when people today say, "Oh, how do I know if I have a problem? How do I know if I should think differently about something that I might have an addiction or I might be using something in excess?" I say to myself, and I say to them, at first I had no answer to that because everyone's so different. But then I said, when I really look backwards, I say to myself, if I had thought about the things I was losing, the things that were slipping through the cracks, the things that were blatantly being told, "You don't have this anymore. I'm dumping you. You no longer have this privilege in the office. You don't get to do that anymore because you don't have those friends anymore. You burned those bridges." everything that I lost consistently for 30 years mattered to me. And what I tell people is that if you think about the 5 most important things in your life, if addiction is taking away more than 2 of them, you need to fix that. And I think that when you look at it that micro, but also that personal for yourself, that's where you can really be honest. Because if you think about it from any other angle of the world, from other people, from your parents, from society, from your job, you are eventually going to make excuses to continue to do what you're doing because you're going to think that you can change it. But when you only focus on that conversation with yourself and you find that the things that you're losing, the only way to fix it is to stop. It's crystal clear. And it's something that I think, now I'd love to tell you what's changed, but I feel more myself than I've ever felt. And I don't feel like I have to think about doing things before I do them. And that's how I know that my life has aggressively changed. Fast forward, the hardest problem and the biggest challenge I have in today's day is interacting with the people that knew me then and that know me now. And without saying it this bluntly, though I do often, my aunt can tell anyone this because I said it to her about a year into my recovery and it shifted everything for us. I just said, stop treating me the way that you treated me when I was ripping 10 shots of Fireball and blowing 8 lines of cocaine a day. I am not that person anymore. I don't want you to be treating me that way. Most people in my life, I don't have to say that to because they've seen the shift because of the way I lead. But not only do we have to sometimes remind people that we're not the same people, sometimes we need to even go further to say, I want you to know that we were both wrong at that moment. It's okay to share and be open about things and to be truthful and to share our strengths and our accomplishments. It's not always to validate who we are. Sometimes it's just to show the world who we are because we know who we are. And I think I'm at that place in my life.
You really have shown in this world where things are so sensitive and, especially in a public world that both you and I are in, you on the speaking bureau side, me on the speaking side. Some can say sharing your truth, especially if it's anywhere near the P word, the political side of things, could be detrimental. And I think you have done so much housekeeping on who you are that everything is organized and stacked, and there's no way you can't pull out those drawers and share those drawers of how you feel about DEI, about the political landscape, about, people, um, not doing things for the right reason as it relates to especially diversity, equity, and inclusion. And um, you you have more of an impact than you know. One of the things I've said to myself and to others a lot lately is like the last thing I want to do is tell my kids someday if the world sort of our democracy burns down or things just go to hell in a handbasket and they ask what were you doing and my answer is building my speaking career. Like shoot me, frickin' shoot me. Um, and it's a delicate balance, but you've made me bolder. You've made others bolder by sharing that. And thank God it's, something that you can't not share because we all need to hear it. So I thank you for that. Hey guys, Erin here. Stop. Do not do it. Don't fast forward. I have something too important. I have a couple of very passive aggressive questions to ask you that you don't want to miss. Here they are. 1, do you find yourself often comparing yourself to others? Like, they work harder than me, they get noticed more than me, they have better luck than me, they're smarter than me. Or do you also just feel exhausted from having to always work as hard, if not harder, than everybody else to stand out and succeed? Like, I know you have these challenges. We all do. And this is why I wrote the 50% rule. And I know you need to read another book like you need a hole in the head. But I'm telling you, this book and this rule, I'm obsessed with it. And it has changed my life. It has changed the lives of others around us. And it has also been the formula for success behind so many successful people. Savannah Bananas, Hamilton, Weird Al Yankovic. The 50% rule is the simplest shortcut to stop comparing, stop copying, stop chasing other people, and like literally compete in your league of your own. There isn't a day that doesn't go by where I stop myself and I'm like, oh, she did a talk that I wish I could do. She's got more. No, it doesn't matter because we don't compete in the same league. I compete in a league of my own because I am constantly 50% ruling things. So if you're interested in this concept, which by the way is more fun as a team sport, but at least start with yourself. You cannot miss this book. It's not only powerful, it's really freaking fun to read. That is always my number one goal. It was my number one goal with my first book. It's my number one goal with the 50% rule. I want to make it enjoyable to read it. Why? So that you read it. So if you feel like you are stuck with these comparison cramps or just all the symptoms that I talk about in the book of sleep running syndrome, self-doubt gout, and pioneer paralysis, and well, you have to read the book to find out more, then just go buy the darn book. Easiest way, go to Amazon, search the 50% rule, and I cannot wait to hear how you 50% rule things. I want to ask you one of the two questions we ask everybody. And it sounds like you might have more than one story. I love your freaking stories. But it's that buck that story we ask everybody. What's a time when you bucked the norm and good things happened as a result, which obviously you've been doing a lot of your life. But do you have a story or two that sort of shows when you bucked the norm and good things happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a general kind of just mindset I've had. I think it leads into this idea of work doesn't have to suck even when things in your life do, right? Is this idea that like I use the shared humanity I have with recovery so many times throughout my day, week, quarter, year. Some of my strongest client relationships, like at some of the schools that I sell speakers to, are those that are in recovery as well. For something that is so dark and has been so limiting for me over the years, it sure as heck has unlocked a lot of opportunity. And I think that the only reason why that happened is because of the fact that I took the risk of sharing my story broadly with the world. And an example of the single most decision I've ever made to uproot a traditional norm and see the benefit that it's had for me has been the way that I've navigated recovery. I had tried to get sober multiple times throughout the years. I don't think any times for the right reasons, a number of times for the love of my life that I was losing in that moment. Bless all those men and boys' hearts. That was fun. But I will say that I knew that traditional ways of getting sober were not going to work for me. Part of I think my special sauce as a agent, as a representative, is the fact that I don't believe that my time is any better than anyone else's. And I don't have all the money in the world by any means. I've had money. I haven't had money. I've made money since I've been 22 years old and sold a show, all these different things at a very early age and, then wasted a lot. But I can say this for certain. I am rich when it comes to giving of my time. Not only the fact that I like to give my time, but I really see value in having conversations with folks. And I thought about that when I got sober, and I said to myself, I'm not going to go to AA. I just know I won't. I know I won't. I know I'm not going to follow a cookie cutter plan. And I had been told, well, if you don't go to AA, you're never gonna get sober. And for me, that was a little bit of a challenge, right? And so I said to myself, how do I do this? And it was hard at first. I have to give my sister Shauna credit for this. It was a dig for sure, right when I got my DUI, but it was probably some of the best advice at that time that I ever got. And it was, can you imagine how much attention you're going to get when you're a year sober? Everyone is going to be overloading you with attention.
Wow.
And she was speaking my love language at the time.
Yeah.
And I never realized it in that moment, but it was that moment where I was like, she's so right. I'm going to get all this attention. And so what I decided to do is I said, I can't be tacky and be like, I'm 2 weeks sober.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I said to myself, you know what? This first month is going to be hard. But after I get through that first month, I am going to, without telling anyone, I'm not going to weigh anyone's opinion. I am going to disrupt what people think recovery is. And instead of going to AA, instead of going to rehab, instead of having a sponsor and doing all of these traditional things, I'm going to turn to the world to be my AA and be my sponsor and be my rehab. And I'm going to open up this journey to the world, and my accountability is going to be my social network.
Back to your reality TV background, like it all sort of circles all start to overlap.
And I said to myself, if I can be public with my social media following, which isn't huge, but it's decent in size, then I can do this. And that's a level of accountability for me. Some people may need that quiet conversation in a small room with really shitty coffee, talking about, the steps and how they navigate their life. And for me at that time, that wasn't going to cut it. So I needed to do what was good for me. And many people would say, wow, you have so much agency being so vulnerable. And I never looked at it that way. Quite frankly, I looked at it as opening my big fat mouth and how it was going to get me in trouble, and it was going to limit me in what I would do in this world. But I needed to do it because for the first time, sobriety was more important to me than my reputation. The real gift, and where you say, you've disrupted a system. And I can say this to people, and it's why I think I am so incredibly outspoken around breaking through stigma and being vulnerable and understanding that, I don't do the whole, the past is the past, leave it there.
Mm.
I've said this before and I'll say it again. For me, the past is a stone. It's heavy as hell. But as you go from month to year to 5 years, that stone doesn't shift in size. It's just as heavy. It is just as dark. You get stronger. And then carrying it becomes a lot easier. And so for me, I always keep the past in my pocket because it's the only way that I can navigate what's in front of me, and I can make sure that I don't go backwards. But what I've really seen the biggest amount of impact around is how being open about my story has impacted other people. And I get emotional thinking about it because in turn, it validates why I'm doing this for me, but it then gives this added bonus that I know I'm helping others. And I have my human lighthouses. It's people that I was looking at in the distance that were keeping me on course at the earliest days of my recovery, when I didn't even know the difference between sobriety and recovery at that time. And my first year in sobriety was a mess. I thought I had it all figured out and I thought I was doing everything right. And it was just like month after month, it was like, I'm still sober, but this just got smacked in the head with this and smacked in the face with this. And if it wasn't for those people that I would see, I'm a year sober when I was 6 months sober. And then I always knew that person was 6 months ahead of me. My uncle, who's almost 40 years sober. It's like, I keep that thought in my mind of wow, how amazing is that going to feel when I am at that age? But then I also know that there are, I hope hundreds that are looking at me as their human lighthouse. And I hope that they are carrying that light forward in a way that allows for another generation of people to see. What's cool is realizing what limits you and doesn't serve you and sharing that with the world so that more people can lead a better life and they can take 50% of what I'm saying, apply it to their life, and make sure that they stay true to who they are, but also don't let history repeat itself.
Everything. So good. So good. Thank you for that. Before I ask you the last question, where can people follow you and hold you accountable and make sure that you continue to stay sober, but also continue to be a lighthouse for them?
I love LinkedIn. I know that sounds crazy, but Erin knows that about me. I feel like definitely if people are upset that LinkedIn has become more of a blog for your personal life, I have definitely contributed to that epidemic, you could say.
People want it, and people that say they don't are full of shit. Nobody wants another company announcement. Crap.
So I am very vocal and active on LinkedIn. I try to bring a voice that allows for people to feel human, but also understand that like this whole idea that we keep politics and our personal lives out of our professional lives, it's a crock of shit. The secret there, I can tell you, the permission slip is our politics have not kept our personal lives out of their mess. So we have every right
Mm.
to intertwine their mess
Mic
into
drop.
our lives as
Mic
well.
drop. Mic drop.
And so, the day that they want me to keep my thoughts around politics, religion out of the workplace, like let's take politics and religion out of things like the workplace
Yeah.
before you need me to keep my mind out. So I am very big on LinkedIn. If you want to see really cute, terrible, in my opinion, when it comes to talent, reels of me and my dog lip syncing when we get to work, I am on TikTok. I am
I
on
love it.
Instagram.
I
It's
can't
at
believe I'm
Drew
not connected
Sull.
to you on Instagram yet. That's
At Drew Sull on
amazing.
Instagram, Drew Sullivan on LinkedIn. But I also am launching a podcast at the beginning of 2026 called Humans of Higher Ed. I sell mostly to college and universities. I believe that the daily ticker, the news cycle, is telling us everything about higher education that makes it look like it's at the gates of hell and that Hades is waiting for you when you arrive on your college tour. It is hardly the truth. For every one horror story at a college, there's 100 incredible moments of community and bridge building and interfaith work that is happening. Don't let the media and many folks these days, pundits in the news, tell you otherwise. Anti-Semitism is no more rampant than Islamophobia, is no more rampant than racism, is no more rampant than homophobia. They all exist in all of our communities. We all have to be, as my friend Eddie Glad says, the leaders we've been looking for. We need to be the voices that we're searching for. We need to be those people to call out injustice and to be the people that, are sharing truth to power. And for me, I feel like the truth that I know is the humanity of the people that are leading higher education right now. And I feel like I have this voice and privilege and platform to be able to share those voices in a way where people might see that not only is there a lot of good happening in higher education, but they're also human beings just like every one of us. And we shouldn't be commenting on things we don't know about anyone. And so we shouldn't be starting, just because it's the government and media has made it easy to do so. So, that's my kind of way to keep in touch.
Yeah.
But as anyone knows, I'm also always open to an email and, I don't hide my identity, so you can find me anywhere.
We'll link you. We'll make it easy to find you, Drew Sullivan, and not, the bazillion other Drew Sullivans. So final question. Your last tip to make work suck less.
I have to say it again. Show up with your baggage. Find the people at your work that have a similar looking bag.
Mm.
Find people at your job that care about your bag.
Mm.
They exist. They're there. And you never know how showing up with your baggage might help them show up with theirs, and how together you might be able to get through those hard times and do better work. Because the reality is that work sucks because of the experience we're having. It's not because of anything that is infinite, anything that is forever. The rare cases, yes, you need to change jobs, you need to change careers, you need to change industries. But I would say the first step, and I'm all about steps, I think that, it's those collective steps that we take that help us create bigger change in our lives, is really understanding that if you want to do the right work, you have to show up the right way. And if you don't show up the right way because you're cheating yourself of something that you deem to be limiting or something that you're not proud of, you are walking through the doors of your job every day, basically saying, I know I'm not going to do my best work today. I know I'm not showing up at the best version of myself. And I reframe that question as, how can work suck if you are showing up knowingly, not as yourself? Because I don't know anywhere that I show up knowing that I can't be me and think it's a great place.
No.
So the reality is like, be you, be true to who you are. Know that we all are in the same ocean. We're all just in different boats. For many people, it's because they don't open themselves up enough to connect, because they are being pushed into a corner to not be true to who they are. And that starts with kicking to the curb the idea that personal life and professional life, they are separate, because if not, we wouldn't have a way to think differently. But they don't have to be completely separate. It's like those two spheres where there's that circle, that intersection of kind of, in a way, it's kind of like, this matters to you, this matters to you. Well, of course they may intersect and both matter to you at the same time. You have to give yourself permission to allow that to happen. And if you don't, I think work will always suck for you. And it doesn't matter where you work, what you do, because it won't be about the job and it won't be about the work. It'll be about you.
Oh, yeah. Such good advice. Such tough love advice, which is our mantra and everything that we believe in. So I love it. Thank you so much, Drew. Like you said, you are very giving of your time. I appreciate you, the time here and the time you've just always given me throughout our time being friends. So thank you for sharing it now with others. Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us, and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. And we see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.